Well, he's less popular in the polls even than the coalition leader Malcolm Turnbull, but that hasn't stopped Tony Abbott from putting his thoughts together on the way forward for the Liberal Party. These thoughts are contained in a new book. It's called Battlelines. It's being promoted as the essential manifesto for the thinking Liberal. Tony Abbott is the opposition spokesperson for Families, Housing and Community Services. He joins us this morning in our breakfast studio. Tony Abbott, welcome to breakfast.
Nice to be with you, Fran.
Now, Tony Abbott, let's be honest about it. Normally when a book like this is written, it's seen as a blueprint for a leadership challenge. Is this the blueprint for an Abbott-led Liberal Party?
No, it's not, but it is a contribution to debate. We're not going to win the next election just by criticising the Rudd government. We're not going to win the next election just by announcing policies a couple of weeks before polling day. If we're going to succeed, we need to have a thoroughgoing debate about what's wrong with our country and what can be done to fix our problems. And this is my take on some solutions that I think will reflect mainstream values and be consistent with liberal conservative thinking.
And we'll come to a couple of the big ideas in a moment, but I noticed on the 7:30 report last night, when you were asked about leadership, you said, "My time is not now, this is Malcolm's time." How much time does Malcolm Turnbull have? He's hit new lows today of 16% as preferred Prime Minister.
Well, Malcolm was our choice. I think he was the right choice. And Malcolm will lead us to the next election. And my job, all of our jobs, is to help Malcolm and our party to be as competitive as possible at the next election.
In the book, you say clearly you think that the coalition is not unelectable next time around. Do you still think that?
Of course.
Even with your leader at 50 points behind as preferred Prime Minister?
Look, there are lots of great leaders, very successful leaders, who went through pretty dire patches in the polls. Now, I can think of Jeff Kennett, I can think of John Howard. They all had bad periods in the polls, and in the end, come election time, people will judge the government and its record. They will judge us and our proposals, and I think we've got every chance of winning. Let's
talk about climate change. You go to it in the book a bit, but you also say repeatedly that the public respects politicians who are fair dinkum, and you speak your mind. Yet you're prepared to support the government's emissions trading legislation in order to avoid a double dissolution election, even though you basically think it's a dog. How is that fair dinkum?
Well, I didn't think much of the government's industrial legislation either, but I voted reluctantly in favour of it because this is a democracy and you've got to respect the people's mandate. Now, the people gave the Rudd government a mandate on workplace relations. They gave the Rudd government a mandate to deal with climate change, and I think that has to be respected.
What about after seeing today's news poll showing that more Australians want Australia to wait now until the rest of the world shows their hand at Copenhagen? Did you and Malcolm Turnbull jump too early on this?
Well, I think it's very encouraging that people are having second thoughts, it seems, about some of this. But the fact of the matter is this is the government's problem. Let the government deal with it and we'll respond appropriately. But what we aren't going to do and what we shouldn't be expected to do is fight on ground which is not of our choosing.
But you have clear ideas on this. You, for instance, are more attracted to the idea of a carbon tax than an emissions trading scheme. You say a carbon tax would be fairer, less open to abuse. Could a carbon tax be a simple solution to the obvious split in coalition ranks?
Well, let's wait and see. You're right, Fran. I think that if I were in government and more able to make these things happen, we would be thinking about all of this. But the fact is we're not in government. We can't run the country from opposition. And that's why, in the end, it will be the government's problem to deal with, not ours. If the government changes, different story. But certainly I think that if the simple challenge is to put a price on carbon, if you were to put a carbon tax on energy consumption, if you were to put a carbon tax on fuel consumption, and if you were then to rebate that tax to the people who paid it, you would have raised the price of carbon, you would have avoided an increase in the overall tax burden, and you would have gone down a path that everyone understands. So I think that would have been a much simpler way of going.
One of the biggest ideas in your book is fixing the federation so we can run the country properly, as you put it, by giving more power to Canberra. You've even written a draft bill for a referendum. Presumably then, if Prime Minister Kevin Rudd goes to the next election with a referendum to expand Commonwealth powers in terms of health, you'd be supporting him.
Well, I'm wanting not to see more Canberra control. What I want to see are clear lines of authority and responsibility.
But you want the capacity for more federal control.
Well, I think that someone has got to be in charge, and this three-legged race that we currently have, with the Commonwealth and the states jointly trying to manage a whole lot of very important national issues and problems, isn't working very well in health or education or water or infrastructure. But if the feds did have the authority that I think they should have, you certainly wouldn't have federal bureaucrats running public hospitals, because the federal bureaucrats are not intrinsically better than the state bureaucrats. What you'd have is local hospital boards running hospitals. That would be the kind of thing that I would like to see happen. I suspect it only will happen if the feds can ultimately call the shots, and that's why I think this constitutional referendum is a good idea.
Another idea of yours in the book, and it surprised me, was this notion of delaying the pension age. A lot of people hated that idea when the Rudd government announced a change in the pension age in the budget. By the sounds of it, you'd want to go further and faster, much faster than the 23 years currently in place. But you pitch it not as a punitive policy, but an inclusive one. What do you mean?
Because we don't want to exclude people from economic participation just because they get to the age of 65. Let's not forget, Fran, that the pension age was set at 65 back in 1908 when life expectancy was under 60. Today, life expectancy is over 80. Today's average 70-year-old is in a far better state of health than 70-year-olds were 100 years ago. So I'm not into making people work till they drop, and whatever the pension age is, the fact is that people who can't work will still have access to things like unemployment benefits and the disability pension. But by setting the pension age at 65 or even at 67, we're effectively saying we expect you to give it away when you get to that age. We think that you are effectively past it when you get to that age. And what I'm suggesting in the book is that a higher pension age could be used to fund extra benefits for families. So what we will hopefully have over time is an answer to the demographic problem identified in the intergenerational report. We'll have more kids, we'll have a larger workforce, and we'll have fewer people who are in long-term dependence on taxpayers, and that's going to produce ultimately a more productive and I think more cohesive society. And
just very briefly, we're out of time. I notice in the book you talk about being the hard man for the Howard government. I remember clearly in a condolence debate in the Parliament, when the Parliament was talking about after the suicide of Greg Wilton, a Labor MP, you said the best thing we could do is be gentler and kinder with each other. It seems to me 2 days later you weren't really putting that into practice. How do these two realities sit together? When you look in the mirror, which one do you see, the hard man or the gentler, kinder Tony Abbott?
Well, I guess when I look in the mirror I see some changing faces. That's what I see. But in the end, Fran, it will be up to other people to judge what they think of me. But when I had those jobs as Leader of the House and Minister for Workplace Relations in particular, I was in the middle of the political maelstrom, and you've got to make some pretty tough calls there. But I think, as a general principle, that if we gave people the benefit of the doubt more often, including our political opponents, and if we gave more credit where it was due, we would have a better polity. For instance, John Howard, to his credit, would often pay tribute to the economic reforms of his predecessors, and I think it would do Kevin Rudd some good if he were to do likewise.
All right, Tony Abbott, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, Fran.
Liberal frontbencher Tony Abbott, and his new book, Battlelines, is published by Melbourne University Press. You can get it now.